How's it being? You get Lena all day to yourself. How's that?
It's going so far so good.
Oh, good. Are you working or are
Uh,
you home too?
I'm actually working from home, yes.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything we can do on our end, let us know.
Okay, definitely.
Yeah. And, since we never had a chance to talk before, it's been great to have her in class all year.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
And,
yes. So,
none of us were really expecting all of this, but as long as we're here, we'll make the best of it.
right, exactly. So the district, why? Uh, the district is using strictly just Zoom. There's no like a alternative option.
No, I think it's really, I'm not sure how to answer that question because we really haven't given a lot of direction. So I've been teaching online for years and I just decided to use the thing that most people were using elsewhere because it would be familiar. But I'm happy to use whatever works best. I've used Google Hangouts, I've used Skype, I've used all sorts of stuff. Um, has this been working well for you guys to use Zoom?
Earlier during the day, during like early on in the week, I couldn't really get in.
Oh,
And I guess like the app was telling me one thing, saying like this meeting should start in a few seconds, and
uh-huh.
then I tried to rejoin again, and it said that it wasn't available,
I
and
see.
it had like a little loading thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
the reason I asked too is that I mean, not like I wanted to sell, for GoToMeeting or anything. I mean, I work for Log Me In,
Oh,
and we do have GoToMeeting, GoToTraining, and GoToWebinar.
okay.
Right now, the company is actually giving it away for free. So
Okay.
you just have to actually go on a website and then do some, check it out, and I believe it's free for like 3 months to help
Okay.
out with this whole situation. So they also have like great resources online, and I believe, I mean, the meeting experience,
Hmm.
it's a little bit different than Zoom.
Yeah.
Definitely, because we're much bigger,
Hmm.
and it's very fluid.
Yeah.
So it's very seamless. So I mean, I just thought, maybe there's also another option in case Zoom doesn't uh,
Sure.
pick up
I'd be
some.
I'd be happy to work with you on that. In fact, is that still WebEx?
I'm sorry.
Is GoToMeeting still WebEx?
No, it is not. No, it's
Okay.
totally different. Yeah, totally different
Okay.
products. WebEx is actually Cisco, and GoToMeeting is Log Me In,
Oh,
which is
okay.
Citrix.
Because when I
Um,
was in the private sector, I used both, and I couldn't remember which was which.
yeah.
But you know what we could do? We could do an extended session and demonstrate it, and also use it as sort of a case study. Because here we've got a great, parent, teacher, student. This never happens.
Right.
Um, so I think we've got some opportunities. And I was a management consultant before I was a teacher.
Okay.
So I'm happy to have that conversation and explore possibilities so that we can see what works best.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what I can do too is also send you over some resources like the link
Oh,
to
great.
get
Okay.
some information, and then as far as like the message from our CEO also what
Okay.
he's talking about. So
All year long, Lena sits in the back of the class, and all year long, she's probably showed you the blog and all the stuff that she's done. Yeah.
yeah, yes.
And I didn't know that you were hiding a technical resource from us.
I've been telling her the whole time, and I kind of like just look up to her discretions.
Yeah, totally.
Giving
Okay.
me
Well, Lena, you've got my email, so why don't you share that with your dad, and then we'll just start a conversation and see what goes from there.
definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, sounds
You
good.
know where to find me. I'm not going anywhere.
Right. We're not going anywhere else. So.
Yeah. Cool. All
But
right. Well, very nice to meet you.
you too. So I'll let you get back to your class.
Okay. Thank you. Hey, I see some other people joining. Deanna, Vivica, Bernardita, Yasmin. Who else do we have? Michael, good to see you. Emma. Oh, hi, Emma. First time. And somebody who says it's iPhone. I don't know who iPhone is. Who's that? Oh, it's somebody who's still connecting. That's why it says iPhone. So, Lena, this is your first time with us. What we did last time was basically checked in with each other, which now we've had a chance to do. And then we took a look at a few pages from the book Fahrenheit 451. This morning, I posted an actual page that has the book in it so that it's easier to find on the course blog. Probably the best way to do what we're doing is to read on our own time and then come back together and chat.
Mm.
But because this is so new for everyone, what I thought I would do in these first few sessions is kind of leave the conversation open to what people were interested in.
Mhm.
And yesterday we actually had a few people talking about how all of these circumstances have enabled them to slow down a little in their day. And they were doing things like getting more sleep or cooking or doing some art. And in a way, that's actually perfect for this book because one of the main characters, Clarice McClellan, is a 17-year-old who really wants to slow down and experience life. Hi, Jennifer. And so what I thought I might do is, first of all, for anybody who hasn't joined us before, if you notice on your screen, if you do a little rollover with your cursor, you'll see a menu on the bottom. And then you'll also see, if you click on chat, there's a window that will open up on the right, and you can type messages here. And what they'll do is they can either show up to everyone, or you can select someone from the drop-down menu in the blue where it says everyone, and I can send a message to anyone that I want to who's in the room. It's kind of like a digital way of sending notes in class, except that unlike usual, I don't care. If you have something that you want to share with somebody, go ahead. If you want to share it with everyone, that's also okay. Now, someone's got a microphone open, and I hear like a radio or a TV in the background. If you're a person with a radio or a TV, can you mute your mic? Ah, beautiful. Well, almost beautiful. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So does anybody, before we get started, does anybody have any questions or any new updates that they want to share or ask me about?
I think I have a question. How will this whole coronavirus situation affect us having like a semester final and ending our school year?
Yeah,
Will it affect it like bad, or will it affect it like good?
that's
Will
a
we still
great
have like
question.
finals, or
What was that last part?
will we still have finals, or will it just be like this?
Yeah, the short version right now is that nobody knows.
Mm.
So the only official district word we have is that we're closed until at least April 3rd. And LAUSD, the Los Angeles Unified School District, just announced that they're going to stay closed until May 1st. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't make it back to campus before June, because the way this is going seems really hard to control, especially because so many people have so many different ways of doing things, and I'll leave it politely at that. Now, for our purposes, in some ways, life doesn't change a whole lot because I operate on trust. The same people who were kind of taking shortcuts and not doing stuff before are pretty much the same people who are taking shortcuts and not doing stuff now. And the more that we interact together, the more that you do, two things happen. Number one, we all learn a little bit more. And number two, when people look back and say, hey, how did you handle the great pandemic of 2020? You can show them your blog, which is even more heroic now and unusual now than it was just a month ago. Because people who are doing work just because they want to and because they want to learn something or get better at it, that really speaks to character. So I'm not really operating on a grade threat kind of a basis right now. I'm operating on a, hey, let's show up and learn together. And I don't get paid more or less depending on how often we meet or how much work I do. I'm here because of you. So that's a typically Prestonian long answer to a short question, but does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And I feel sorry for the seniors and a lot of people who are losing out on things like prom and grad night and graduation. But I really want to keep everybody healthy and alive. So it seems like sometimes a small price to pay. Anybody else with any questions, as long as we're chatting before we get started with the book? Okay. So where we left off, we're not making huge strides in terms of how many pages we read per day. I think yesterday I maybe read 2 or 3, and I'll probably cover about the same amount of territory today. And along the way, as usual, I'll interrupt myself, and you're welcome to as well if you have any questions or comments about the reading. So let's do this. If you look on the course blog, and if you're following along while I'm reading, in fact, I'm going to click over on my course blog also, just so I can give you some guidance. There's a new page on the course blog, whether you're in the AP class or whether you're in American literature, and it says just Fahrenheit 451. And if you scroll down, we are about, if you're on the web version of the blog, where the blog archive is and it says July 2019, we're just a little bit past that in the text. And I'm going to go back to my Zoom screen now, and if I can find it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up with the reading, and feel free to interrupt or chat at any point. If you weren't with us the last couple of days and you haven't been reading, we're talking about a fireman who actually starts fires instead of stops them, who burns books, and who meets a young woman, 17-year-old girl, who actually causes him to rethink things a little bit, and he gets a little confused. He seemed like he was happy when we met him, but now he doesn't seem happy. And as he goes home into his wife's bedroom, and I say his wife's bedroom because she's there asleep in a separate bed, it's really cold and lonely, and he uses imagery like death. And the funny thing was, I said death and then funny, but Clarice, the other character, her uncle is based on Leonard Mead, who we read about in The Pedestrian. So here we go. The room was cold, but nonetheless, he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path even as the foot swung. His foot kicked. The object gave a dull clink and slid off in darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out the nostrils was so faint, it stirred only the furthest fringes of life, a small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disc, gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of his small handheld fire. 2 pale moonstones buried in a creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching them. Mildred! Her face was like a snow-covered island upon which rain might fall, but it felt no rain. Over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimble wasps in her tamped shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out, softly, faintly, in and out her nostrils, and her not caring whether it came or went or came. Can you imagine how creepy it would be to walk into a pitch black room where you knew someone was sleeping and ignite a small fire so that you could illuminate like a lighter, and all of a sudden you see that the face is awake and staring at you, but something's wrong with it, like it's unconscious? That freaked me out. As he stood there, I skipped an important paragraph. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed. The small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of the tiny flare. She overdosed. As he stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping sound, as if 2 giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black linen down the seam. Montag was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart. The jet bombers going over, going over, going over. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them. One and one and one and another and another and another did all the screaming for him. Now, when we have a long, meandering sentences like that, if we were to write that in an essay, that would be a run-on sentence, right? But
Yeah.
Ray Bradbury does that when he's the author, when the character has stuff going on in his head, because if you think about it, most of our sentences in our heads are kind of like run-on sentences. So he's trying to capture that feeling of panic. The other thing that's important about that scene is that Montag, the protagonist, has a lot of conflict in him about his job, about his life, and we'll see that grow as the plot goes toward the climax. But there's also another conflict going on in the background, and that is the country's going to war. The house shook. The flare went out in his hand. The moonstones vanished. He felt his hand plunge toward the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushing the mouthpiece of the phone. Emergency hospital. A terrible whisper. He felt that the stars had been pulverized by the sound of the black jets, and that in the morning, the earth would be covered with their dust like a strange snow. That was his idiot thought as he stood shivering in the dark and let his lips go on moving and moving. Now, as I read this next section, I want you to keep something in mind. Ray Bradbury wrote this book back in the 1950s. And back then, everything was different, obviously, but especially when it comes to medical care. And here's where it actually, when you think about how things are today, and you know, Lena, when you went to the hospital the other day and saw how things were operating, it looks almost like a drive-through mechanic, right? And back in the 50s, doctors knew your names. In fact, does anyone know what a house call is? You can guess.
Wouldn't that be when the doctors would like go to like the people's house like to check up on them?
That's
Like when they were
exactly,
sick, like in bed?
that's exactly right. So they would come to your house, and not only that, but they would know your kids' names and what happens in your life. I mean, they would really be like a personal relationship. So he was predicting all of this, and he couldn't know how unfortunately right he would be. They had this machine. They had two machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poisons accumulated with the years? It fed in silence with an occasional sound of inner supplication and blind searching. Hey, whoever's arguing with your sibling, turn off your mic. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optical helmet, gaze into the soul of the person he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw, but did not see what he saw. The entire operation was not unlike digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on anyway, shove the bore down, flush out the emptiness, if such a thing could be brought out in the throb of the suction snake. The operator stood smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working too. The other machine, can you imagine a nurse smoking a cigarette? The other machine, operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-stainable reddish-brown coveralls. This machine pumped all of the blood from the body and replaced it with fresh blood and serum. Got to clean them out both ways, said the operator, standing over the silent woman. No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang, a couple thousand times, and the brain just gives up, just quits. Stop it, said Montag. I mean, this guy's talking about his wife dying. I was just saying, said the operator. Are you done? Said Montag. They shut the machines up tight. We're done. His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into their eyes without making them blink or squint. That's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she'll be all right? Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right here in our suitcase here. They can't get at her now. As I said, you take out the old and put in the new and you're okay. Neither of you is an MD. What's an MD? Nobody knows what an MD is? Medical doctor? Hey, if you ever have to go see a medical, huh?
I couldn't unmute my thing. I was gonna say that.
Okay, it's sort of important when you go to the doctor to know that they're an actual doctor. So look for those initials if you need to. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell, the operator's cigarette moved on his lip. We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many starting a few years ago, we had the special machines built. With the optical lens, of course, that was new. The rest is ancient. You don't need an MD case like this. All you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in half an hour. Look, he started for the door. We gotta go. Just had another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here. Someone else just jumped off the cap of a pillbox. Call if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a contraceptive in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long. So they didn't even think it was a big deal. And now I want to pause and ask you a question. What does it say about a society where someone trying to kill themselves by overdosing on sleeping pills happens 50 times a night?
It's a really bad society.
Yeah, it's a society full of really unhappy people. And the men with the cigarettes in their straight line mouths, the men with the eyes of puff adders, those are poisonous snakes, took up their load of machine and tube, their case of liquid melancholy, sadness, and the slow, dark sludge of nameless stuff, and strolled out the door. Montag sank down into a chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he put out his hand to feel the warmness of breath on his palm. Mildred, he said at last. There are too many of us, he thought. Now keep in mind, this is like 70, 80 years ago he wrote this book. There are billions of us, and that's too many. Nobody knows anyone. Strangers come and violate you. Strangers come and cut your heart out. Strangers come and take your blood. Good God, who were those men? I never saw them before in my life. Now, you know how right now a lot of people are concerned because we're all sort of separated from each other? And so we don't have the usual connections that we do. We can't give each other hugs. We can't say hi to good friends or share a meal. And those things matter. But it's also important to remember that sometimes if you can picture the crowded hallways at Santa Maria High School as an example, or the crowded sidewalks of New York City, so many people walk past each other and don't know even that they're there. There was a book written about this called The Lonely Crowd. And if you think about it, people can actually be more lonely in a crowd of thousands walking down a hallway or a street than on a trail somewhere if you're hiking. If you're hiking and you're the only one there and you pass someone, it's almost weird if you don't say hello, right?
Yeah. It's like awkward.
Yeah. And
The
so
first
he's
time
really,
I went on a hike, oh sorry.
uh-huh. No, go ahead.
The first time I went on a hike, I just found like the need to like say hi to people or like smile, and it was just like so weird.
Yeah, because we need those connections, right?
Yeah.
I hope you were 6 feet away though.
Yeah.
So this society is kind of impersonal. It's frantic. You know, yesterday we talked about Clarice and they had to make the billboards 200 feet long because they were driving so fast, otherwise they wouldn't see them. And now we realize that a lot of people in the society are so unhappy and disconnected that they're actually doing harm to themselves. Half an hour passed. The bloodstream in this woman was new, and it seemed to have done a new thing to her. Her cheeks were very pink, and her lips were very fresh and full of color, and they looked soft and relaxed. Someone else's blood there. If only someone else's brain and flesh and memory. If only they could have taken her mind along to the dry cleaners and emptied the pockets and steamed and cleansed it and reblocked it and brought it back in the morning. If only. He got up and put back the drapes and opened the windows wide to let the night air in. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Was it only an hour ago, Clarice McClellan in the street and him coming in the dark room and his foot kicking the little crystal bottle? Only an hour, but the world had melted down and sprung up in a new and colorless form. Laughter blew across the moon-colored lawn from the house of Clarice and her father and mother and the uncle who smiled so quietly and so earnestly. Above all, their laughter was relaxed and hearty and not forced in any way, coming from the house that was so brightly lit this late at night, while all the other houses were kept to themselves in darkness. Montag heard the voices talking, giving, talking, weaving, reweaving their hypnotic web. Again, he's thinking, so it goes on. Montag moved out through the French windows and crossed the lawn, without even thinking of it. He stood outside the talking house in the shadows, thinking he might even tap on their door and whisper, "Let me come in. I won't say anything. I just want to listen. What is it you're saying?" But instead, he stood there, very cold, his face a mask of ice, listening to a man's voice, the uncle, moving along at an easy pace. Well, after all, this is the age of the disposable tissue. Blow your nose on a person, wad them, flush them away, reach for another, blow, wad, flush. Everyone using everyone else's coattails. How are you supposed to root for the home team when you don't have a program or know the names? For that matter, what color jerseys are they wearing as they trot out on the field? Now, again, this trips me out. So many things in this book Ray Bradbury predicted, but they weren't that way back then. When he wrote this book, it was unthinkable for a team to move from one city to another, or to change their uniforms, or even for players to move from team to team. In fact, the All-Star games, like professional baseball, everybody like hated each other. They weren't like buddies like they are now. You would never hear of like a LeBron James saying to Antonio Davis, hey, why don't you come over from New Orleans and play for us? Unthinkable. But he predicted it. Montag moved back to his own house, left the window wide, checked Mildred, tucked the covers about her carefully, and then lay down with the moonlight on his cheekbones and on the frowning ridges in his brow, with the moonlight distilled in each eye to form a silver cataract there. One drop of rain, Clarice. Another drop, Mildred. A third, the uncle. A fourth, the fire tonight. One, Clarice. Two, Mildred. Three, uncle. Four, fire. One, Mildred. Two, Clarice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, sleeping tablets. You know how when you fall asleep and your day kind of turns over in your mind? Can you almost feel that happening for him? Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, tablets, blow, wad, flush. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Rain, the storm, the uncle laughing, thunder falling downstairs, the whole world pouring down, the fire gushing up in a volcano, all rushing on down around in a spouting roar and rivering stream toward morning. I don't know anything anymore, he said, and let a sleep lozenge dissolve on his tongue. At 9 in the morning, Mildred's bed was empty. Montag got up quickly, his heart pumping, and ran down the hall and stopped at the kitchen door. And that's where I'm going to stop for now. So let me ask you this. Has everyone seen the guiding questions that I posted on the course blog?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're okay, but they're also kind of boring, usual assignment reading comprehension questions. So yesterday, some of you gave me some great ideas for a post for after our chat. Based on what we read today and based on whatever you're thinking now, does anyone have any suggestions? I even had to take some notes.
I actually liked your first few questions about like symbolizing and then like all the animals. I thought those were actually pretty nice.
Okay. So we're comfortable staying with what we've got. Does anybody else have a suggestion? Oh, it's like just like being in class. It's so quiet.
Thinking.
What were some of the other suggestions since I wasn't here yesterday?
I forgot what they all were, but they're on the recording, so you can see them, Lena. But the winner was something about slowing down and taking time for things, and that's the one that I put actually on the blog. So if you take a look, and if it's not clear when you see it, you can always send me a message, or we can jump back on, or you can ask me tomorrow.
Can this be also something to do with like deja vu or something like that?
With taboo?
Like, no, deja vu.
Oh, deja vu.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So almost like a foreshadowing moment where we're kind of thinking this might have happened before?
Yeah.
I like where you're going. I don't want to spoil anything, but maybe. All right. If you're in the AP class, you probably saw that there's a second session for us on Friday to look at writing. So please make sure that you see that prompt on the course blog and kick a message to me if you have any questions about it. If you're in the American literature class, and one of the things that we started talking about today, Lena asked me the question about, hey, when are we going to go back to school? And the short version is nobody knows. So if you're a person who's sitting there thinking, hey, can I get away with not showing up and not doing anything? Yeah, you could. And obviously, by the number of people who aren't here today, some people are taking that path. However, one of the greatest advantages of doing things in a way that's transparent on your blogs is that when people ask, and they will, because you're going to graduate high school one way or the other next year, hey, what did you do during the great pandemic of 2020? While school wasn't happening, what were you learning? You can actually show them. And if you thought that your blog was going to distinguish you from everybody else a month or two ago, and it will, now it's going to be massive, the distance between the people who have the kind of character that makes them want to learn stuff, even if it's, Lily posting paintings of cactuses or someone making a wonderful dish. Like, I forgot who was talking about cooking yesterday. Was that you, Odalise?
Yeah, it was.
Awesome. So if this is a great time to use social media to its fullest. Ordinarily, I'd say, man, don't take a picture of your sandwich and show everybody. But if you're making a great, dish and you want to share your thought process around that, literally use your blogs for the purpose and let's continue the process. I'm really excited about the kinds of conversations that we get to have now that we're not bound by a bell or the usual kind of standardized stuff. So I've got lots of ideas as usual, but I'm also open to yours. Does anybody have any parting words for today before we dump out of the Zoom chat?
I did want to say, because since I thought we were coming back to school, like from Friday to the Monday, I didn't turn in my journal because I was going to catch up. So I do have my journal with me.
Awesome.
So I'm just going to write instead. It feels better.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm glad you're doing that, Lily. And, for everyone else, I mentioned this yesterday. The only regret that I have is that we didn't have a chance to come back one more day, or that we didn't know that Friday, because I wouldn't have collected your journals. I would have had you keep them. So even if it's just on pads of paper, or if you have another notebook, I think that what Lily said is really important, because it's a different kind of writing. It's more personal. It's almost like having a candle instead of a fluorescent light bulb over your head. So I appreciate you saying that. Thanks. Anybody else have anything to share before we leave? All right. And by the way, I don't know if this has occurred to anybody. It just occurred to me. But Lena, I really enjoyed meeting your dad. Before we got on the line, Lena's dad was in the room, and I heard at least one person's brother or sister. If you want to bring anyone to this and make it more of a book club kind of thing, they're more than welcome. I'm happy to open the tent and invite anybody who wants to be here. Please take a look at the course blog and the book, and please encourage your friends in class or anybody else you want to join us. And we'll see you back here tomorrow at 1.
Alrighty.
All right. Thanks,
Bye, Dr.
everybody.
Preston.
Bye, Dr. Preston.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.